Welcome to today's edition of 3 Minute Halacha. While it is true that most kinds of knots are prohibited on Shabbat, there is a possibility of tying a knot that is totally permitted on Shabbat. But to do so, those kinds of permitted knots cannot have either of two different kinds of characteristics. The first characteristic it cannot have is be a ma'aseh uman, is be a professional kind of knot. These were knots that typically were tied by sailors or by camel drivers, knots that were very tight and meant to truly hold. The Raman Shin Yud Zayin in 317 in the first paragraph notes that nowadays any kind of double knot is presumed to be a possible maaseh uman, that kind of tight knot, and would, if present, be prohibited, at least on a rabbinic level. The second characteristic of a knot that can't be present if we want to be able to tie one on Shabbat is a kesher shel kayama, is a knot that is meant to be permanent. The definition of permanent may be as much as 7 days. However, halachically, we rule that if the knot is meant to be in place for 24 hours or more, then it's called a permanent knot. That's the definition offered by the Pri Megadim. As a result, if I have a knot that is not a Ma'aseh Uman and not a Kesher Shel Kayama, it would be permitted. One example of such a knot is a single tie knot. And so, for example, if a person were just to take two ends of a bag and tie it just once, wrap it around a single time, that would be permitted on Shabbat. Similarly, tying shoes on Shabbat would be permitted. Why? Because the first time when you wrap the two laces together, that is not a Maseh Uman, and then the bow itself is not meant to be a Kesher Shel Kayama. However, if you then double knot the lace, that already crosses into the Ma'aseh Uman category and would be prohibited midrabanan. A practical problem that arose over the years in shuls and actually caused a major change of something that we do in shul in the last generation is the gartel, is the belt that is used to tie a Sefer Torah. Many years ago, the gartel was a very simple strip of cloth that was tied with a bow. However, because that bow knot around the Sefer Torah at Mincha time, Shabbat afternoon, will not be untied until the next time the Torah is read on Monday, more than 24 hours later, it is now very, very common that the gartel, to avoid any problems of tying a kesher shel kayama, is either made with Velcro or with a clasp of some nature and no longer requires a person to tie the gartel, the belt around the Sefer Torah. And so, as long as both characteristics are absent, maseuman, that tightness, and that it is not a kesher shel kayama, a permanent knot, those kinds of knots would be permitted to tie on Shabbat.